And so here we are at the LGBT Center in Los Angeles, celebrating intersectionality, celebrating Black lives, celebrating queer lives, and talking to two men who are trying to make these two worlds one.
In the beginning,
why are you gay?
Who says I'm gay?
You are gay.
This actually happened through an independent group of Black community LGBT leaders and voices. This group is...
They use carrots, they use bananas, they use cucumbers, and other metallized ones, and they put them inside themselves.
I think it's important for us to speak on the homophobia in our Black community.
This, also known as NCCJ, defines colorism as a practice of discrimination by which those with lighter skin are treated more favorably than those with darker skin. This practice is a product of racism in the United States in that it upholds the white standards of beauty and benefits white people in the institutions of oppression, media, medical world, etc. Now that's a great definition. The only note I'd like to make is on the part where it says it is a product of racism.
Sure, well, I think that Jewish values undergird my politics to a certain extent, just because values in general undergird people's values. But every argument that I make, I believe, has to have a secular rationale, because whenever I'm arguing with people who don't share my biblical worldview, it doesn't make any sense for me to cite the Chumash or Tanakh.
This is just ridiculous.
Okay. If I had to guess, most of you watching this are probably familiar with the following: being lied to, ganged up on, told you're crazy when you complain, and when you have proof of your mistreatment, gets totally ignored. That's right. This is how I treat all my loved ones. Coincidentally, it's also characteristic of abusive people. Riddle me this. What wants to emasculate you, loves abortion, and only seems to care about your money? The correct answer is half of you guys' girlfriends. But it also goes for the government, and by extension of its influence, society. The aptly named nanny state is most effective gaslighting us whenever we imply it's anything less than perfect. Most people have Stockholm syndrome from being raised by an embittered and childless public school teacher that stinks like a wet dog instead of their mom and dad. So they see state institutions as their ever-available babysitter, which they idealize as a loving father. In reality, it's more like a my 600-pound life welfare queen hopped up on Jenkum. So like any teenage girl with daddy issues, our way of dealing with that is dragging a porta potty to the railroad tracks, then pooping and peeing until we get hit by a train. No, wait, I can explain. Because we're essentially being socialized by the government, we're unable to even notice we're getting molested because it's the norm. And on the off chance we acquire the ability to describe the injustice being committed against us, they'll either pretend it never happened or double our dosage of CBT. Conspiracy theories are simply a form of pareidolia, much like seeing a face on your piece of toast. Or when you catch me out of the corner of your eye squatting on your pressure cooker like a gargoyle and dropping a big red one in it right when you're about to make some rice. A mere hallucination. You think that's a tad too specific? What makes you think I didn't do that to all of your ancestors? Human beings evolved to notice predators, and that includes things like me pooping in your pottery or politicians sending each other cryptic messages about pizza and pasta. So if you ever pick up on something like that, make sure to ignore it, okay? By the way, this evolutionary tendency does not apply to things like Russian collusion, organized religion, Watergate, imperialism, colonialism, systematic racism, capitalism, and pretty much whatever else demented 174-year-old Noam Chomsky has conniptions about. So don't think you're clever when you try to flip it around. Speaking of whom, have you seen his talk with Foucault? I know a creepy bastard with AIDS isn't that much better than an old Jewish bastard with Alzheimer's, but I gotta give him props for raping Chomsky like he did those Arab children in Tunisia. Somewhere in the hour-long session of knob slobbering, they hit the crux of the issue. Foucault points out that Chomsky's concern for social justice depends on faith in the concept of justice in the first place, which is impossible if everything's a social construct, prompting Chomsky to slip and slide around the point like a sperm. Despite their relative obscurity, these two shriveled testicles managed to define the next half a century of public discourse with this rancid dialectic. This paradigm has been inculcated so deeply we barely notice when it rears its ugly head. It doesn't matter if left-wingers call their conspiracy theories structural analysis, they're beholden to the same retort. The brain seeks out patterns that will reaffirm its cognitive biases because that gives you a sense of validation. You can't point out any pattern without catching a whiff of this rhetorical flatulence thanks to Vox-watching carpet munchers, the lowest common denominator on whom the droplets of the philosophical golden shower unleashed by postmodernists trickle. The not-so-subtle implication made by these retarded pedophiles from hell is that grasping at meaning is futile, since it simply doesn't exist. This rebuts the concept of logic altogether, so your brain and the consciousness that resides in it might as well be toilet fodder. We only try to make sense of the world because it gives us a sense of security, but we're just deceiving ourselves. Seriously committing to this means we're supposed to be in a constant state of dread, so if it feels bad, it must be true. This is why conspiracy theories make them seethe, especially the ones that are true and not just Tartaria and the mud flood. Ding out of my pants. They throw a monkey wrench in the gears of the massive vibrator that is the pissing match between nihilism and ideology. The former because everything matters, and the latter because you don't get away with anything. It's not as easy to be indifferent when you find out you're getting gyno because of a rat burger elite who thinks it's funny to put hormones in your food because you're a sissy cracker. It also becomes harder to justify outsourcing governance to cockroaches who scuttle around the bowels of the White House looking for chug jugs of jizz to guzzle. The guy currently in charge of the safety of your children is an 80-year-old chimo with a crackhead for a son and a chocolate chimp for a VP. Does that sound like anything but an absurdist joke? Tinfoil hats talking about hermaphroditic frogs are infinitely more grounded, because at least they have an ideal that they can tell we're falling short of. The mainstream ridicule of the idea that tap water is giving amphibians big booba pales in comparison to their contempt for the transcendent and profound. Even if they can't see the forest, at least autists can focus on a tree. We're expected to take a nap under one and wait for it to fall on us so we don't have to think about anything ever again. Just like it's better to prepare even if what you're preparing for might never happen, it's preferable to be ridiculed for trying to figure out what's going on than to stand by and play with your shrunken shrimp nuts pretending like none of it affects you. Because before you know it, you'll take your me time a little too far and end up in Tunisia with Foucault. Before you mutter that it's all a simulation while waiting for your death in a puddle of your own splooge, try figuring out who stands to benefit from you doing so.